welcome back to Bob's Little Sports Shop. I'm Jeremiah, and today we're going to talk about fletch types. I get a lot of questions. I have this bolt lying around the shop. It's more of a model than anything else. A lot of people think that this is something that would actually get shot, and that's not the case. This is just to show different styles of fletching. These are different things that you'd either do by hand or on a jig. So this is a Easton Magnum bolt. This one right here, this is actually the factory fletch. Right here, that's a vane. It's a synthetic material. It's not made from feathers, while these are turkey feathers. They're all, as you can see, this is a what's called a parabolic shape. That's the shape of the feather. It's all the same here. Just so that way we can strictly talk about the different ways that you can fletch an arrow on a jig. The first one here, this is going to be what we call a 3-fletch. It's pretty standard. You'll see it on most arrows. It's the most iconic fletch type that you'll see on an arrow. So what we have is basically it's about 120 degrees each way. So about 120 degrees away from each other. It comes out to 3 vanes. So pretty simple. We'll call it a 3-fletch. So there's a setting on that depending on which jig you're using. We use a Bitzenberger. If you use that, it's the top setting, and that's it creates a 3-fletch. You can do an offset or helical or anything like that. In this case, we just have like a slight offset on all of these. And what that essentially means is it's just slightly to the left or to the right, and so it's not helical where it'd be wrapping around the shaft. And that's your 3-fletch. This one here, this is going to be a what we call 4-fletch. You might be able to see it from the back or maybe from the side. You got 1, 2, 3, 4 feathers here. So what it does is it kind of makes like a T shape. A lot of people get this mixed up between a 4-fletch and a X-fletch. So I kind of made it exaggerated on this bolt just so that we could see a more exaggerated difference here. So you can see that with the 4-fletch, it's straight up and down and side to side. This is an X-fletch here. So these two get mixed up very frequently. And this one, you can see that they're pinched super close together, and on this side, super close together. And then you have a gap across the top and a gap across the bottom. Whereas this one, it's 90 degrees for each feather. This is not the cleanest because, as you can imagine, I couldn't really use a jig for these ones, so they're by hand. So it's a little sloppy, but this is supposed to be about 90 degrees. If you did it in a jig, it would be 90 degrees exactly. That's your 4-fletch there. I'm gonna get into what each of these essentially does. But anyway, this is what we call 4-fletch. This is an X-fletch. This would be the 3rd setting down, 3rd setting from the top on a Bitzenberger. And you do have this option. I believe it's gonna be 105 degrees across the top, and then it's like 70 something degrees, and that's how they make the X-fletch. This last one here, this is a flu. This is a certain fletch design that you use, and you pretty much always do it by hand. You can't really use a jig for this one. This flu design is for shooting aerial targets, or if you're hunting birds, upland game birds, or something that you're shooting in flight. So that's essentially what flu is for. So that way it creates a lot of drag, and if you miss your target, then your arrow comes down a lot sooner than it would because it's got all this drag, so your arrow doesn't go flying away into the next county. So working backwards here, so that's a flu. This is actually 3 full-size feathers. There's a lot of different ways to fletch flus. A lot of people very popularly will just use 1 feather and wrap it all the way around. Some people will use a full-size feather, and they'll just do something like a 4-fletch here, but they'll use a full-size feather that has the whole profile to it. But anyway, this is just one of a couple different flu designs. This is 3 full feathers here, but essentially the concept is that the more surface area that you have for the feather, it's going to slow it down, and it's going to give it some drag, so that way that arrow just, if you miss your target, the arrow will just kind of fall, and you won't lose your arrows. X-fletch and 4-fletch are going to pretty much accomplish the same goal here, because in this case we're looking at the same size feathers and the same weight here, because that's essentially the same weight, I should say, because these feathers are the same length, same shape. With the 4-fletch and an X-fletch, you're accomplishing the same goal because you have the same surface area. It's just going to be more of a design difference, and that's kind of your preference or what kind of bow you're shooting. If you're shooting a recurve, X-fletch doesn't really work super well because all that fletching contact, at least for shooting off the shelf, then you'll get a lot of contact. You might get some deflection there. It may work really well, probably better on, like, say, a compound setup with a drop away. Like I said, they're going to accomplish essentially the same goal. The idea of a 4-fletch as opposed to a 3-fletch is going to be more surface area. The more surface area you have on a feather, it's going to slow it down a little bit, but in this case, because they're still low profile, the idea is that with more drag, you get more control. And so that's going to stabilize your arrow sooner. In comparison, comparing a 4-fletch to a 3-fletch, a 4-fletch will stabilize sooner and it's gonna be a little bit more forgiving on your shot than say a 3 fletch. So that's the idea there. Like I said, you do lose a little bit of speed. Also, when it comes to the vanes and feathers, the more surface area you have, you do get a little bit more noise because of the drag. So the drag does make a little bit more sound with more surface area on your feathers or vanes. You have to find that balance between the surface area being appropriate enough to give you the forgiveness that you want, but also being quiet enough for whatever purpose you're using it for. Of course, if you're using it for target, a lot of guys for indoor and stuff like that, they'll use really large feathers, and it's very loud coming out of the bow, but it doesn't really matter because you're shooting a target. 4 fletch, it's essentially for more surface area, more forgiveness. It's a little bit louder, but definitely stabilizes a lot sooner. Works well for recurve setups and compound setups. In the case of recurve setups, if you're hunting at close distances, you get that stabilization really quick, and so that's great for those closer shots. Now, getting to a 3 fletch, like I said, this is pretty standard. It's very common. In this case, this is a pretty long vane. I believe this would be a 4-inch vane. This vane's a little bit longer than some of the crossbow bolts. You see now the vanes that they have. A lot of them are around like 3 inches or 2 inches. A lot of the older bolts use like a 4-inch vane. Also, arrows tend to use their stock fletch, or factory fletch tends to be like a 2-inch vane. So this would provide a little bit more stabilization than those. But yeah, you'll get a lot of stabilization out of a 3 fletch. It's just a matter of getting more if you wanted to add more feathers or add more vanes, or if you wanted to use a larger vane or smaller vane. Also, something to take note of is that the surface area and length of a vane is going to accomplish the same goal as more vanes. The principles are the same. So if you have more vanes that are smaller, same thing as having less vanes that are larger. So you're accomplishing the same goal because it's surface area. The only thing you may see is you might see a weight difference. These ones here, like I said before, they're a parabolic design. There are other shapes that you can get for vanes and feathers. Those shapes have other effects as well. Some of them will have ridges, and that's going to help with stabilization on a smaller vane. Some of them have a shield cut, which is a little bit higher profile in the back, so it's not as quiet, but it's more forgiving. There's a lot of different shapes here, but generally that's as far as fletch types that you can use with a jig or by hand. These are the different fletch styles that you'll see on most jigs. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments you'd like to leave below, you can do so. If you like the video, then give us a like, subscribe, and share for more videos like this. Thank you.